Oh, okay. All right. Well, guys, wow. What a busy day today, huh? I reserved one classroom. We got interrupted, as you all remember, and then I went over to the other classroom. They didn't want, they had class 2. Had to wait an extra hour. 2 hours go by, 3. Here we are, though. Finally, we can finish up our first class this morning. I apologize it took so long, folks. It must be a really busy day, is all I can imagine. To hell with reserving rooms on this campus. Oh my goodness. I learned the hard way today. All right, folks, so where were we, right? We were looking at a whole film analysis and the theory of it all, really more the spiritual origin of not veracity and the storytelling, okay, that is very much supernatural. So, for the third time, what we're doing in this film is revelation versus information, okay? Most stories provide information, but this film is going to create revelation. It's going to create that emotional and spiritual recognition that will alter the audience internally, inside, right? Kind of similar to one of the first scripts I started teaching way back when, Inside the Voice of Love Falling Down. If you're curious about that script, reference some of the old recordings on Zoom. They're still on Canvas. So, we're doing it this way because this is how it's going to connect with the audience. The story is externalizing experiences that humans already carry. Okay? Intuition and emotional memory, dreams, deja vu, and a sensing of presence after loss. Okay? There's a supernatural element, supercharged supernatural element to not veracity, and it's that of which the homeless man, right, is not this supernatural phenomenon. No. The real supernatural force is the persistence of connection itself, right? The whole film is about connection. Connection between mom and son, connection between two strangers, connection of the film itself to the audience, connection to me and my attachment to this script, the connection between us, right? My fellow students here, our connection, the bond, the connection, the pathway being created. That's what it's about, folks. So, go ahead and put that up. I've got another little diagram for you. Okay? We're going to show you the spiritual engine. Right? The spiritual engine. Like a car, right? We went over our engines. Remember the 3-diagram model of the engines in a good script writing? Well, we're doing another engine for you. This is the spiritual engine, okay? But essentially what's going to happen is loss is going to lead to absence, which will lead to memory, which that memory will lead to the big SR, spiritual residue, okay, which will then lead to recognition, right? We're only human, we're going to recognize what that is, okay? Which then takes us to our reality, destabilization. Oh, oh, oh. All right? There's a little diagram of the spiritual model. Okay? The spiritual vroom vroom engine. We have our loss, which leads to absence when the audience is watching, and that'll lead to their memory, which will lead to the spiritual residue that's left behind after they're done watching the film. They'll have recognition, they'll recognize, and the reality becomes destable, right? It destabilizes, reprograms them to look inward, to look towards themselves, to find some self-worth, if you will. Who cares what other people do? Look at what you can do. That's what we want our audience leaving with. Okay? Most supernatural films, most supernatural films are, horror movies, right? We're not doing that. But there's some other ones too. But most supernatural films in general, they ask the simple question, what is haunting us? What is haunting us? This film asks us. It asks us, what if love itself is the haunting? That's what this film asks us. It asks us, what if love itself is the haunting? Okay? Very, very good. Not Voracity does not attempt to explain, okay, the supernatural. It attempts to, or it will, recreate the feeling of encountering something the human mind cannot fully contain. I'll say that again. Not Voracity doesn't explain the supernatural. It recreates the feeling of encountering something the human mind can't fully contain. Okay? And so there's the spiritual, that's the spiritual motor of this thing. Laid out for you. Okay? Let's look into why some films feel alive. And let's look at the architecture of cinematic presence. Okay? Most films are watched. Right? Most films are watched. Very few films are experienced. Why do some movies feel strangely alive? Why do certain scenes in these films feel like memories instead of fiction? And why can a single moment in a film feel heavier than an entire action sequence? It's because cinema is not merely storytelling. Cinema is atmosphere. It is emotional geometry. It is the subconscious recognition, right? The psychological rhythm. A film becomes powerful when it begins operating below language. Woo! Hold up. A film becomes powerful when it begins to operate below language. Let's look at cinematic presence, okay? Presence. Many films, information, many films, I should put it this way, overload the audience with exposition, right? And lore and explanation. But audience actually responds to emotional vibration, okay? Pacing and silence, and a city street can feel spiritually empty despite being crowded. For example, a hallway can feel haunted before anything happens. Atmosphere is the emotional weather. Sometimes a character sitting alone in a room carries more power than the pages of dialogue because the audience projects meaning into stillness. Information, filmmaking. What happens next? That's information filmmaking. We don't do that here. You know what we do here? We do present filmmaking. For example, Instead of what happens next, what am I feeling right now? We write it that way so that the audience is asking themselves that. Okay? It's the psychology of the atmosphere, right? Audiences remember moods more than they do plots. And it's because you deliver it in a way where they can internalize. Okay? Another thing that we do commonly is characters as contradictions. Humans are emotionally inconsistent. Anybody want to argue? No. Humans are incredibly emotionally inconsistent. People joke during grief. People sabotage love. People fear intimacy while craving understanding. Weak characters are predictable. Okay? Real characters are contradicting. Desire, fear, defense mechanism, personality. Most personalities are improvised survival systems. Dialogue should often feel like emotional camouflage rather than a clean-cut exposition. Okay? Boring. Let's look at the feeling of spiritual cinema, guys. Some films feel larger than themselves because they create a sensation that reality is thinner than we thought. Silence and repetition and dream logic, symbolic imagery and existential pacing. It creates that feeling that something invisible exists underneath ordinary life. These films do not merely entertain, okay? They emotionally observe the viewer. It's the rhythm of consciousness you want to get into when you're writing a script, okay? Editing is that of which psychological breathing. Okay? Fast cuts create stimulation and anxiety. Long takes create introspection and discomfort. Silence creates projection and space. And that stillness amplifies emotional tension. Stimulation, exhaustion, silence equals reflection, turns into emotional openness. Quiet scenes often hit harder after chaotic scenes, right? Because the audience has now become emotionally vulnerable, emotionally exposed. Why do people respond to certain films? Well, if the film is done right, they'll be doing these things. People rarely revisit films for the plot alone. Okay? They return for the atmosphere, for the emotional recognition, and the unresolved meaning, the subconscious familiarity. Some films become emotional locations inside the viewer's mind. Right? Hitting that sweet old memory. Sweeter memories, right? Take me back. Nostalgia. A film is not a train ride, folks. It's a seance. Atmosphere in cinema is like humidity before a thunderstorm. It's invisible, but your nervous system feels it coming. And some dialogue is not communication. It is camouflage worn by frightened souls. Editing is surgery performed on time itself. A quiet scene can feel like staring into an abandoned church after everyone has left. Trauma. Okay? Trauma. Oh yeah. Trauma, baby. Trauma in characters behaves like a ghost living inside architecture. Great cinema feels like being told a story. feels less than feeling like being told a story. You're in the story, right? It's like wandering through someone else's dream while slowly recognizing pieces of yourself. The symbolism is that of which so important. It's the emotional radiation leaking through the walls of the narrative. Okay? Audience doesn't just sit in a theater and merely watch characters. It's boring. Subconsciously, we are searching for fragments of ourselves. Certain films feel like old memories from a life you've never lived, right? Kindred spirits, if you will. Powerful ending to a movie does not close a door. It leaves the audience alone in a hallway. Stillness in cinema is so dangerous because the audience begins to hear their own thoughts. Some scenes are not scenes at all. They are emotional weather systems. Okay? Passing through consciousness. Here's the big emotional cloud, and it's passing through consciousness, right? It's your brain. The strongest filmmakers sculpt absence the way others sculpt action. A haunting film behaves like perfume trapped inside old fabric, and years later, traces still remain of that faint aroma. Cinema is sculpting the inner experience. Okay, there's you. It's all about the inner experience, okay? Filmmakers not merely arranging shots and dialogue. They are arranging emotional gravity, subconscious tension, psychic rhythm, if you will, memory, imprinting. Strongest films are not consumed. They continue unfolding internally after the screen goes black. Okay? It's all about you. We watch movies to learn more about ourselves. So we need to make movies with that intention, with knowing that it is very much a reflection of who's watching it and what they can pull from it and learn about themselves. By memory, by spiritual residue, by creating things that cause recognition, so that this finite reality that we all live in can be destroyed, collapsed, and new growth can grow, can come. So these are the reasons why not Voracity is going to really change the world, even if it's just one person at a time. Now I got an exercise for you for the next half of class here. And this is pretty fun. So I'm going to erase this real quick because we're going to need this. And go ahead and get your notes and stuff out, because you'll need some paper and a pen for this part. Because we are going to write a scene together. Let me check my zooms, as I always do. Long-running joke in these classrooms.